Well, very happy Inktober to you and yours. And to celebrate, I thought I'd pull some books out that I find inspirational for when I do works in ink. So, ink is my favorite medium. I'm a woodcutter, but my first love was ink work, thanks to comics. So I have two piles here. I have three books that are kind of how-to books, like instructionals for working with ink specifically, and then I have a small pile here of more inspirational works, like things to look at and get ideas from. So look at these ones first. These three books here are kind of a variety of approaches. So I'm going to go from the maybe the least accessible to the most accessible. Although this least accessible one is actually my favorite art book, maybe of all time. This is Rendering in Pen and Ink by Arthur Guptill, and I've had this book for ages, and I've done a ton of drawings out of here. It's super thorough. The thing with this book is that it was written in the 70s, and people were a lot more verbose back then. So you can even see from the table of contents, it's pretty hectic compared to what we're going to look at in the next couple of examples. But the information in here is great, and it's very thorough. Starting out with these, which is really important exercises if you're working with ink to get your kind of muscle memory and figure out how to make different variety of lines. So this is just exercises going like even pressure, thick to thin to thin to thick, etc., etc. And that works with a nib or with like a felt tip. Like it works with like these tombos. It also works with a brush and a fountain pen. So I do these exercises quite a bit in the margins of my sketchbooks. And some more exercises here. This is the kind of book that it's probably not a good idea to read cover to cover because you'll just never make it. I've tried reading this cover to cover before and I've not made it through. This is more of like a reference book, unlike the other two. But there's some fantastic exercises in here, and getting like gradients with different styles, like different kind of marks. These are really good exercises to do and just inspiring to look at. We get to kind of basic directional shading, cross contour. One thing that I picked up from Guptill in these books is in his hatching, he'll throw in these little kind of picks that go in a different direction, just randomly. You see it in some of the other examples too, maybe somewhere down here, kind of to add visual interest. And I took that up in my own work, and I think it's a nice little trick. Just kind of break up some of these flat areas if the image calls for it. And I love these. These are like compositional studies, sort of figuring out your focal point, getting like white against black, surrounded by gray. That would be this one here. Black against white, surrounded by gray, and the different variations. So working from photo. And then the back part of the book is just a bunch of different works by a variety of artists, and kind of talks about different approaches and different styles. And you can see quite a variety of approaches here. So this book is super thorough uh, and very well worthwhile just to have on the shelf. And just I'll take them out and just do a little drawing of this. It takes 10 minutes and learn so much from it. But that's the first one. Next, this is kind of the middle approachable, accessible book. And this is DC Comics Guide to Inking. This is by Klaus Janson, who's a fantastic inker. And if you're watching this on YouTube, so if you're interested in ink and you use YouTube, you probably have come across him. He's all over YouTube these days, which is really nice. You can see his table of contents here is a little bit more sparse. The first part is about the tools. Second part is about more practical how to ink, especially with a view towards storytelling. So all of these books have a section on tools, which is nice. But I really love like this kind of thing, where he shows you the pencils and then the inks next to it. You can see sort of how to go from this to this. He talks about how, so this is Frank Miller, how he, his pencils, a lot of the line weights are the same, and how he went in and kind of modified them a bit, especially here in the hands. I also like the spotting of blacks. Here we just have some hatching indicated, and he decided to go in. He also has like a full like penciled comic book page that he breaks down how to ink it, kind of step by step, going through the whole page, which is really wonderful, especially if you're, well, it doesn't even matter if you're doing comics. If you're inking anything that has been penciled, this is really helpful. Kind of the approach to doing it. I love this, just different lighting schemes, and how to do that in ink. So, section on textures, of course. One of my favorite things about ink is texture. I'm gonna talk about that with the next book, which is the most accessible one, which is this one by Alphonso Dunn, who's also a YouTuber, and this is fairly new. So I think this was probably made for the modern reader. There's less writing. There's a good amount of explanatory stuff, but it's not like the Guptill book, Rendering in Pen and Ink, where it's more writing than pictures. I think this probably has more pictures, but it's a lot of the same stuff, but maybe a little bit easier to digest. And it's this beautiful work. And he actually comes in and like I love how he does this. He'll tell you like this is scribbling, this is uneven hatching, kind of which technique is used in which section to convey the kind of texture, the kind of material. Talk about how to and how not to sort of show the form, especially in perspective, make it look 3D, and different textures. And my favorite part of this book is these texture studies, something I had never done before, and I learned from this book, and I really like it. Get this really cool kind of bowl here with different textures on it. And then this is a really nice section too here. This is the stages of a finished drawing. So it goes from composition, maybe reference, to penciling, and going through and doing the final inked piece. And really helpful. And I think all three of these books in tandem are great. But like I said, this one is probably the easiest to digest, most straightforward, right? It's called A Simple Guide. This one is a bit more. I mean, it's made by a longtime professional comic artist, and then this is a book of a slightly different era, but exceptionally valuable. And like I said, this one here is probably my favorite art book of all time. So those are the instructional ones, and now I have a few more inspirational ones. So this one here is actually not even ink. This is scratchboard. But you can learn a lot about ink from how he approaches scratchboard in here. You can see using more or less, two values plus achieving a gray with some of this here to really get a mood. Here's like kind of a morning sunrise mood. Things are kind of quiet. And then we get this like super hectic spread here of pages. This here, like, it reminds me that when you're doing feathering with ink, you're making triangles, and triangles are very active shapes, and you can use that to your advantage. The direction of the feathering, how tight it is, how loose it is, how long and short they are. All that kind of comes into play with bringing energy or maybe subduing an energy into a work. I love this section here. This is like an example of how to thumbnail, really. This kind of goes from bigger ones down to this grid of smaller ones, and you can see how everything is really readable. And it's sort of an exercise in, basically just black and white, really tiny, how to make your shapes read, how to frame things. And the next page is even more so, just little stick figures though. It's kind of interesting texture here. He's really good at framing, so you can see like the head of the figure is black and it has that white shape behind it. Same here, and here you can see like he's dropping out the background line around the face so that it pops more. It gives it a little bit more depth. Same thing along the back. And a lot of times when you work in just black and white, you'll leave a little white edge around your shape um, to pop it. Sometimes you won't, to let it blend in. And so seeing where artists do and don't do that is very instructive. And interesting here how there's a little bit of feathering kind of leading up, maybe to break up the monotony, not just having it a clean white line. And I'm always looking at how people do water in black and white. So the rain is great, but this here, like the standing in the water, you get the reflection here, you get the depth on the ripples. And I'm always just amazed at how people can do that in black and white. So, like I said, this is scratchboard, but all the lessons apply to ink. Now here's just a master class of inking. First of all, I love that this book, the end papers, they start off with the characters in the book and the artist himself. And then in the back, kind of the transformed versions of these characters, as well as the artist transformed. And I got to be careful with this book because there's a lot of stuff that might get flagged on YouTube. So this is a 18 plus book, but just here using focal point, right? We have this one white shape with the dark hair, and the skin is just white, no hatching or anything on it, and then all this rendered kind of background, side ground maybe. I love the different textures of the sheets. Get some wood here. We have like some reflections, and it's amazing what he can achieve with this. And his feathering is really fantastic, and directionality of it is very important. You can see here he has this very busy 2-page spread, a lot going on, a lot of talking, a lot of faces, and yet everything is really clear. So I think like having just a solid black background is a very useful thing to do, and kind of the patterning of light to dark to light to dark across these passages. And the mood, like he's really good at mood. We have this kind of suburban scene, and yet it feels really kind of eerie, really creepy. Something about the use of black and white. There's something, I don't know. I can't put my finger on why, but it's I don't know. It feels really uncomfortable. These scenes, and again here with the water, we get this rain on the window and coming down, and how he has a black line, and then when it goes across the black background, he cuts it in with a white line here, and it's creates this nice rhythm. Just like the directionality, using the white line on the black line on the white side of the house and the white line on the black side of the house here, different textures. And he does this from time to time in this story. It's a completely different style. This is kind of like a dreamlike landscape, and so we have this. I guess this must be done with maybe this is done with a nib, and the rest is done with a brush. But it's an effective kind of indicator for location. And then we come back here, and we just get these silhouettes for the background. This black shape, like just this line cutting across right where the shadow is, and then I like the curtains here. It's this black and this white with these little triangles again, right? Like this, the directional device. It conveys weight. It feels ominous to me, and so thinking about how to use the rendering in service of the storytelling, I think is a really great thing to learn from looking at all of these artists. And interesting how these two shapes are white. Everything else is kind of black with this reflected texture. So that's Black Hole by Charles Burns. This one is kind of instructional, but not exactly. This is Alfredo Alcala, and so the Secret Teachings of a Comic Book Master. This has some writings by people. Maybe I think an interview with Alcala. He talks about his 10 secret teachings for being an artist, which is worth reading, and people writing about him, and like he's writing about tools to use. But I'm looking at his drawings in here, and I think this is from what's the Voltar? I think it's called. It's his comic from the Philippines, and it's so hectic. Like there's so many lines. It feels like it should be just a blob. Like if I tried to draw like this, I feel like it would be a mush of incomprehensibility, and yet it's so clear. Like the focal point here, this figure on the horse. I guess it's because he has this white shape of the arm and the torso right up against the black background there. Maybe the white here framing the legs of the horse. You can make it out. Just enough information in these figures in the foreground to show like their gesture, their body language, but still like managing to group them in a foreground. Here framing the action in this archway with the white background with the figures on top of it. And more of that here. Kind of Conan's face here. I think this is Conan. Conan and Voltar are a little bit similar. You can see why he was hired to do Conan. But just amazing clarity. All this kind of dark gray of the background with this much lighter figure on the front. And again, using the white of the figure with the black background here. And then the white background with the darker figure on it. Nice compositional element too. And more of that just super rendered and yet very clear. And as a sort of bonus, I have this as well. This is Alcala inking John Buscema. And we can see interested in his hatching on these figures. So this figure here, there's good cross contour going on, and I always like to note the Terminator being hatched a little bit tighter, and then the reflected light being hatched a little bit lighter in here. And then on Conan, like he's using cross contour, but not necessarily in an obvious way. So he's contouring around some of these muscle forms, but yet when it comes down here to the legs, it's a lot of vertical and maybe just slightly diagonal. And to me, this reads as making him feel taller, maybe more stable. And then we have these kind of diagonal swooping background coming in, and then this figure that's more more traditionally cross contour inked. But can you get better than Buscema and Alcala? That's a good question. And just so many lines and yet so clear. Anyway, one more to look at, and that is Jim Woodring. That is Frank, the Frank book here. And it's very different from Alcala, and yet there's a lot of similarities. My favorite thing about Woodring's inking is when he hatches, he very rarely has a very like flat straight line. He puts a little bit of a wobble into it on almost all these sort of even surfaces. And that's something I've adopted for certain elements of my own work. I just love that kind of, I don't know. There's something, it's the energy to it, right? So like how you lay down your line is really important. And again, looking at this just makes that so clear. And also this is a really, really weird comics. So if you're into weird comics, definitely look at these. I love the his tree texture is really great. Same with the foliage here. I love how he gets his gradients. Going from thicker lines closer together to thinner lines further apart. But I always try to think like this looks like white on black, and this is black on white. And where does that change from being like a white line on a black background to a black line on a white background? Somewhere it becomes the other, and it's just an interesting thing to note that I like to look at. And he does it all over the place, and he does it with the cross contour lines here to great effect. Let's see. And this one here, this looks like a almost like an etching. This reminds me of Gustave Doré a little bit, who's probably another good artist to look at for inking, even though he does etching. I'm always astonished at what artists can get from just this simple black and white. It's the thing that drew me to woodcut in the first place, and it's the thing that I love about inking. And I'll say that Woodring and also Charles Burns from Black Hole, they have a lot of their work that's also in color. Woodring has some in color here, and it's fine. I don't dislike it, but I love the black and white so much more. Something about it. So anyway, that is my my Inktober inspiration. That's what I'm looking at, and I would love to know what you're looking at for ink work. So thanks for watching. Happy inking.